Been thinking about alcohol and how it functions as a depressant in the brain, suppressing the release of certain neurotransmitter chemicals, so that in a sense certain parts of the brain go dark and they perform less well at things like balance and planning and decision making, etc. But looking at the brain in terms of chemical mechanics is only part of the picture of what's going on with consciousness and how we turn all that into an expression of personality. And this is where alcohol gets really vague in our understandings, but we know that people, interestingly, partner the act of becoming addicted to the depressant of alcohol with a actual depression, and the alcohol isn't a cure for the depression, it actually worsens the depression slowly. But here is again where it gets to the point that I've been considering about the role that spirit plays with personality. And through taking alcohol, and the stronger forms of alcohol are called spirits, in that they invoke a spirit within the person. But when we have a slight shift in our demeanor that we register as we drink and is more noticeable to other people around us, it might be that our brains are working differently because we're thinking how somebody else's brain would have thought, and that person's actually no longer alive. And it's a sense of energetic transference from the substance itself. It's not like you're drinking somebody's bones or anything, but this is the spiritual environment that we inhabit. So there's no real separation between that other than the natural barrier that's created by your body in the state that it's born and designed to grow. So here's where we can look at alcohol as something that naturally occurs in the environment. As plants break down in water, they become alcohol. But we've taken that process and asserted there's a way to make it medicinal, and it's actually inverse to medicine in every respect. So it's like saying, well, we know it's a poison strong enough to kill us if we overdose on it, but is there a healthy, happy, and safe way to do it at all? And I'd actually say no, but it's designed to make us think yes, because that impulse comes from, like I said, a separate identity entirely to who we were born as. And that starts coming in from the very first time that we drink, and who we are gets confused with who other people have been. So that's, you know, a statement that you can infer a lot from and look at a lot of different ways, but I'm trying to keep it as non-spiritual, actually, so that people can see that these are like ways that matter conforms to whatever state it's in at the time. But the idea that you would act as another person would act in the initial stage of the drinking is followed by something where this darkening of the brain regions increases, and this is something that happens over time with alcoholics till a lot of their brain is dark. But to say they're incapable of doing anything they did before is arguable, and it's something that they might be capable of doing only when they're drunk. And you might see this the same way as something like psychological blindness, where somebody can actually become blind psychologically. There's no physical change that occurs, but they have an actual blindness that can last for years and then cure itself as spontaneously. It's a recorded phenomena. But if you have this idea of one of the main problems of drinking, which is driving, so you have driving along and you've had this initial phase of drinking where you've become somebody slightly different, or you felt like somebody slightly different, and that helped you deal with the fact that you're having a hard time dealing with who you are. And it's something that everybody goes through, and that kind of never goes away, actually. Drinking is never really connected to the root of what that is, but it presents you with these whole other set of problems that we don't even understand properly. So as we're driving along and we're somebody else now who would have been driving slightly differently, you can interpret that a lot of different ways to be the measure where somebody's awareness is slipping because they're thinking to react, but the part of their brain that governs that reacting is currently busy being somebody else. And I think that's a big part of it. And I mean, a lot of people go all the way with it and say, well, when this person drinks, they become an entirely different person. And if they black out and then wake up, it's like I won't even recognize them and they won't recognize me. Those kinds of things, I think, go on in the deeper levels of this thing. But even if it's just this part of your brain that governs driving subconsciously, and you've switched that off physically with the alcohol, but as you've drunk, this state that the brain teaches itself has become governed by the alcohol, and that's deferring to other people out of this, billions of people that have lived and drunk and been within that energy as everything's connected to everything else. And it's like it's not borrowing specifically from the exact plant that's used to make the drink, but that might play a role. It's more the fact that there's the alcohol chemical involved in all of those things. And when you start to look into chemicals and what they're doing and how that matches spiritual things, you start to see through a lot of the noise which surrounds critical information when people are examining things like how the spirit and life is intertwined in a way that acknowledging changes the way you live, but it doesn't really change the way that we study and understand. But this other side of life is definitely there and present and revealed to us strongly through alcohol in a way that it's not through other drugs. And I think that alone puts it on this level where it sets certain guarantees in place because of what it is chemically. And those guarantees aren't good. Whereas the things that people assume are the good parts of it, like borrowing from that first stage of the drinking experience where you're feeling slightly like somebody else and you're doing things slightly differently to you normally would. It's a novel experience. Everyone enjoys that. Sorry, I'm just losing my second point there, but yeah, I'm just trying to summarize the whole idea set into a cognitive framework that is there to explain the distinction between the self-identity and the group identity and the role that this chemical plays specifically in that, because all of the drugs are there to show us different roles that chemical settings form in the human body, and they lead to different understandings, but some of these understandings are things that don't serve who you are, they serve who somebody else was. And when you're not drunk, it's like, well, you can't access that. So if somebody said that, I can only do this thing when I'm drunk and I'm really good at it, and over years they'd set this pattern in their brain that part of the brain that they use when they're doing that thing, they've never used when they're not drunk. So their brain's not actually developed it at all because of this other personality setting that comes in and just has that wired and connected to the activation by the alcohol chemical. I think that's as deep as I can talk myself out of the hole that I've dug around me here, but I mean, I see it with a lot more clarity than I thought was possible while I was still drinking, and this is like just after the 1 year anniversary of me not drinking, so I see less the point than I ever did initially before I drank.